Tonight, the Prime Minister plans to shuffle his cabinet in the midst of a political crisis. Justin Trudeau silent on his future as he plugs holes in cabinet. Who is in, who is not? And could it actually make this worse for Trudeau? At Issue is here. An outpouring of support for Gisèle Pelicot after her ex-husband and dozens of men are convicted of rape. The trial that captivated, horrified, and changed the way France talks about sexual assault. New federal charges against Luigi Mangione could come with the death penalty.
Targeted, premeditated, and meant to sow terror.
Plus, new details on how the masked gunman allegedly got away.
From CBC News, this is The National with Christine Bierak.
Thanks for joining us. Adrian is away. We're learning more tonight about Justin Trudeau's plan to shuffle his Liberal cabinet days after Chrystia Freeland's bombshell resignation. The Prime Minister is apparently still reflecting on his own position, but multiple sources have confirmed to CBC News the cabinet shakeup will happen tomorrow. It could involve at least 10 people with big holes to fill on the front bench. The shuffle comes as Trudeau faces growing pressure to resign, including from within his own caucus. And as Ashley Burke tells us, that looms large as the Prime Minister decides who to bring to the cabinet table.
Dogged with questions about his future, the Prime Minister showing no signs of if he'll stay or go. But sources tell CBC News he's still reflecting and spent the day in his office preparing to shuffle his cabinet Friday.
It needs to happen, right? There have been a number of vacancies for quite some time, and there are a number of important files that need to move forward,
including dealing with another crisis, Donald Trump's tariff threats. Sources say Trudeau's shuffle is all about making his cabinet full and functional by replacing 8 ministers who said they're retiring or stepping down.
I want to spend more time with my kids.
On Monday, the housing minister called it quits. And in a stunning move, Trudeau's finance minister resigned, sending the government into a tailspin. Trudeau tapped Dominic LeBlanc with the job, but he's now doing triple duty with 3 challenging portfolios that involve taking on Trump.
We have a lot of work to do. I don't underestimate for a minute the threat that those tariffs would mean.
CBC News and Radio Canada have learned Ottawa MP David McGuinty will become Public Safety Minister. Toronto MP Nathaniel Erskine-Smith will also join Cabinet as Housing Minister, but on Wednesday didn't let on.
I got no idea until there's some formal offer and announcement. I got no idea.
Trudeau has to make sure he doesn't elevate anyone who could later quit or upset too many backbenchers, causing them to join a growing number of MPs calling for his resignation.
They're going to be a heck of a lot more interested in speaking out once they find out that they're not going into cabinet.
What do you think the Prime Minister will do?
MP John McKay told Power and Politics he still has no idea if Trudeau will resign.
His perception after 50 years of living in a, if you will, political aristocratic bubble is different than the perception or the reality that you and I live in.
Sources say the timing and size of the shuffle shouldn't be seen as a signal that Trudeau's made up his mind about his future.
Ashley, what do we know about who won't be in cabinet?
Well, we're not expecting to see the former governor of the Bank of Canada, Mark Carney, at Rideau Hall tomorrow. The government's talks to try and replace Freeland with Carney have caused a lot of controversy and played a role in her resignation. LeBlanc now says Carney's not in the running and he's staying in the job.
Ashley Burke in Ottawa tonight. Thanks. Tomorrow, you can follow the political action on a live CBC News special. Chief political correspondent Rosemary Barton will lead our coverage starting at 10 a.m. Eastern. And later this hour, Rosie will be here with the At Issue panel. Could this cabinet shuffle turn the page for Trudeau? That's in 20 minutes. The stunning mass rape trial in France that grabbed worldwide attention is now over, ending with a string of guilty verdicts today for 51 men. Sarah Levitt with Gisèle Pelicot's powerful message at its conclusion.
Surrounded by throngs of media and flanked by police, Gisèle Pelicot makes a triumphant exit from court into a crowd of loyal supporters. The 72-year-old inspiring to many for her courage and strength as her husband and dozens of others stood trial for drugging and raping her for years. The verdicts came down Thursday, one after the other, guilty, guilty, guilty. Most carted away. I have confidence, she says, that the future holds the possibility of women and men living with respect and mutual understanding. During the trial, Gisèle described her 50-year relationship with Dominique Pelicot as a happy one. She had no idea that at home, he was secretly drugging her food and recruiting men online to rape her while she was unconscious, telling them to park here by the sports field in their town of Mazon to conceal what would be going on just 100 meters away. Eventually caught, police found 20,000 explicit videos and photos of the rapes. In court, in front of Gisèle, the accused men learned their fate. 47, guilty of rape, including one of raping his own wife, 2 of attempted rape, and 2 others of sexual assault. The heaviest sentence handed down to Dominique Pelicot, 20 years in prison, the maximum. His lawyer says they haven't decided yet if he'll appeal. The other men received between 3 and 15 years, below what the prosecution had hoped for. A few of them walk free with suspended sentences or having already served their time. Those decisions disappointing Pelicot's children and enraging others. This supporter says it's making a mockery of sexual assault victims. Gisèle, though, says she respects the decision of the judges. We only know Gisèle's name because she wanted us to, demanding this trial play out in public because the shame wasn't hers. She also used the last name Pelicot during the trial, though she's no longer married, to reclaim it for her grandchildren. Now she's shed it, going back to her maiden name as she tries to begin life anew.
That's not easy after what she's been through, but she says now she's surrounded by people who support her. Sarah, you were in Avignon earlier this week. What was your sense of the impact of this trial there? Christine, you really can't go more than 2 blocks in the city without running into a huge mural featuring her image or slogans. I also saw her in court, applauded, cheered at, even hugged, held up as a feminist icon. This all stands, of course, in stark contrast to all she's endured inside the courtroom, showing up day after day since September, watching videos of herself being raped, hearing these horrifying details, then emerging to these crowds of supporters. This trial has grabbed global attention, and while she knows her case is extraordinary, she takes the time to say she's thinking of all the other unrecognized victims out there whose stories are still in the shadows. Sarah, thank you. Sarah Levitt in London. Alberta's police watchdog says RCMP officers committed no offense and racism played no role when a First Nations chief was forcefully arrested in 2020 after being stopped for an expired license plate. Chief Alan Adams, former lawyer, now says an independent review is necessary.
The police cannot effectively investigate the police because, as we see in this case, they simply accept what the police officer said without question.
Adam accused police of beating him and targeting him for being Indigenous. Dashcam video showed an officer punching him and putting him in a chokehold. Adam was initially charged with resisting arrest and assaulting an officer. Those charges were later dropped. Luigi Mangione has been extradited to New York. The man accused of murdering the CEO of the largest health insurance company in the U.S. now faces federal charges that could come with a stiff penalty. Yvette Bren now with new details about his alleged plot and getaway.
Luigi Mangione in chains, flanked by armed officers, arrived in New York where prosecutors say he shot and killed United Healthcare CEO Brian Thompson. This after he waived his right to a preliminary extradition hearing in Pennsylvania.
He seemed animated when he was speaking with you. Could you tell us what he said?
No, absolutely not.
Is he officially in custody right now?
If you were in court, you heard the judge say that he was remanded to the custody of the New York City police.
Mangione, already facing state murder and terrorism charges, now also faces new federal charges of murder and stalking.
Almost like hunting out his prey. The feds have ample jurisdiction. He moved across state lines.
The federal criminal complaint shows new details, security cam shots showing Mangione's alleged movements as the shooter headed to the Midtown Manhattan hotel where the CEO was shot on December the 4th. There are images showing the alleged suspect on an e-bike, then masked in a taxi en route to a bus to leave the city. These federal charges could bring the risk of a death penalty.
My instincts tell me that's where it's going.
It was targeted, premeditated, and meant to sow terror.
Police say Mangione's motive for gunning down the CEO was outrage over corporate greed.
Violence to, make your point is never acceptable in our country, in our system of justice.
Still, there's a growing wave of support of sorts for this suspect.
Frustration, anger, and just feeling completely forgotten about by our government.
I fear the glee club behind him. They may have to seek the death penalty, even just to put an end to that. What kind of hero is he?
This case tapping into veins of American rage and suspicion that even veteran legal minds find troubling. Yvette Brent, CBC News, Vancouver.
Tonight, Americans are bracing for a government shutdown that could halt key services and leave workers unpaid before Christmas. Katie Simpson now with how Donald Trump and his billionaire ally Elon Musk fueled this last-minute deadlock in Washington.
The rules are not suspended and the bill is not passed.
And with that no vote, the U.S. government lurches toward a shutdown. The latest Republican plan to fund the government was even rejected by 38 members of their own party.
I'm absolutely sickened by a party that campaigns on fiscal responsibility and has the temerity to go forward to the American people and say, you think this is fiscally responsible.
The proposal was tailored to the wishes of Donald Trump and Elon Musk after both pressured lawmakers into rejecting an earlier bipartisan agreement. Musk, who is unelected and is the richest man in the world, railed against the original agreement online, calling it one of the worst bills ever written, reposting this image with the caption, "Kill the bill," and a meme saying this criminal bill should not pass.
Look, billionaires are running the show here. And so what I want to say to people is you thought you voted for Trump. You didn't actually. Musk is calling the shots, and the House GOP is falling in line.
It's laughable. Extreme MAGA Republicans are driving us to a government shutdown.
If a deal can't be reached, federal agencies are shut down at 12 a.m. Saturday. Workers are furloughed with the exception of essential services, though no one gets paid until a new deal is reached. A devastating blow to working-class families during the holiday season.
I have Border Patrol agents, CBP officers, TSA, air traffic controllers, a lot of federal employees, a lot of public servants who depend on their paychecks.
Trump and Musk had enough influence to derail the first bipartisan funding deal, but not enough to get their version passed, likely a sign of the Capitol Hill chaos to come. Katie Simpson, CBC News, Washington.
Russian President Vladimir Putin spoke for hours at his annual press event. At the highly choreographed affair, he said he was open to negotiate for peace in the ongoing war in Ukraine. Chris Reyes now with the response from Kyiv as Donald Trump presses Ukraine to make a deal.
In front of an audience rising to attention, Vladimir Putin made a clear show of who's in charge at his annual press event in Moscow. He touted Russian strength and opened the door to compromise in ending the war in Ukraine. The highly choreographed event, lasting more than 4 hours, comes as Russia launched another attack on Ukraine overnight. And earlier this week, Kyiv claimed a bombing attack that killed a senior Russian general. Putin said he's willing to talk, but insisted that Ukraine needs to be ready to compromise, something both sides have been unwilling to do. Since Russia invaded 3 years ago, it's conquered more than a fifth of Ukraine, land it wants to keep. Kyiv has consistently resisted giving up its land for peace. But Putin now says he's ready to meet with U.S. President-elect Donald Trump on the issue, something echoed by Ukrainian President Volodymyr Zelensky.
I think only together the United States and Europe can really stop Putin and save Ukraine.
Speaking at the European Council, Zelensky said it's Putin who's standing in the way.
He's very dangerous for everybody. Dangerous because for him it doesn't matter what it meant to be. I mean, this human life, nothing. And I think he's crazy.
Earlier this week, Trump said he's willing to meet with both leaders. When asked whether Zelensky should be prepared to give up territory, he said this.
Got to be a deal. No, got to be a deal. Too many people being killed. That is a war that's hard. Too many people. Got to make a deal. And Putin has to make a deal too.
Putin added another condition to his willingness to negotiate with Zelensky, that he face re-election. Zelensky's 5-year term expired earlier this year. Chris Reyes, CBC News, New York.
A new federal law is now enforced to help people who believe their conviction was in error.
Every single day is another day that how many wrongfully convicted are still in prison. So the sooner the better.
Susan Milgaard helped lobby for the law. It's named in part for her brother David, who spent 23 years in prison for a rape and murder he did not commit. A new tribunal will be created to hear claims of wrongful conviction, and applicants will get resources to make their arguments. Until now, a lengthy ministerial review was the only recourse. The newly elected New Brunswick government is launching an investigation into a mysterious brain condition.
I'm hoping it saves lives. That's what I'm hoping.
Why it's now asked the federal government for help next. Plus, a cabinet shuffle will cap a dramatic week in Ottawa.
Prime Minister, are you going to remain in office, sir?
What's next for a prime minister under fire? And where could things go from here? At Issue will be here to break that down. And later, a baby capybara hits the big time.
We've had people coming to the zoo constantly asking, where is Tupi?
The viral sensation with a strange cryptocurrency twist. We're back into.
There's one right above us.
After weeks of sightings of what witnesses say are mysterious drone flights over parts of New Jersey and New York are now banned at the request of U.S. federal security agencies. But authorities say there's no evidence so far of a threat, that many of the sightings are in fact normal aircraft, and that the temporary drone ban was issued out of an abundance of caution.
Cosmonauts are getting their tools and tethers and equipment set up.
Russian cosmonauts conducted a nearly 7-hour spacewalk today. The pair installed new research equipment to monitor celestial X-ray sources outside the International Space Station. New Brunswick's new Liberal government is following through on a major campaign promise, reversing controversial changes previously made to the province's school gender identity policy. As of January 1st, students will be able to choose their own names and pronouns to be used informally, with parental consent encouraged but not required. Parental consent will be required for students under 16 who want a formal name change on official school records. New Brunswick's new government is also on track to launch a scientific investigation into what's been called a mysterious brain illness. As Kayla Hounsel shows us, it's welcome news for many patients desperately searching for answers.
Oh, that's the spot. Oh, yeah, there's the spot.
Sarah Nesbitt finds comfort in horses. She's been sick since 2020.
Bowels, bladder, numbness and tingling, spinal pain.
She says she's encouraged New Brunswick's new premier has met with the Prime Minister.
Thrilled that we've just had the chance to sit down.
And asked him for funding declined by the previous provincial government to help get to the bottom of what's making her and so many others sick.
For a long time, the patients, we didn't have anything to look forward to. There was nothing. It doesn't exist. It's all in your head.
Nesbitt is a patient of Dr. Alier Marrero, a Moncton neurologist who claims there's a mystery neurological syndrome now affecting hundreds of New Brunswickers and people in 6 other provinces. He says 42 people have died. The former Progressive Conservative government sounded the alarm about the new disease in 2021, but a year later said there was no link among the patients.
The committee has concluded that no such syndrome exists.
A lot of patients are still struggling to trust that it's going to be followed through on. So one step at a time. Thus far, she has followed through on her word.
The Public Health Agency of Canada confirms it received a formal request for federal assistance from New Brunswick last week. It says a federal epidemiologist is now reviewing and refining the province's plan.
It's very important to us, and in fact, it's in my mandate letter.
The province's new health minister, also a physician, says the review will be complete within a few months.
Then PHAC will look at that to assess the integrity of that, the validity of that, and then they will help us. We will draw conclusions. They will look at what we conclude.
Glyphosate is a binder to heavy metals.
Nesbitt is convinced the cause of what's making people sick is environmental, but says the promise of new research is giving her hope.
I'm hoping it saves lives. That's what I'm hoping.
Come on, Shuggy.
She says her partner is also now a patient of Morero's after recently falling ill with similar symptoms, and she wants to find out why before it gets any worse. Kayla Hounsell, CBC News, Cannon Station, New Brunswick.
As the bird flu virus continues to spread in the U.S., there are growing concerns about where it could go next.
Influenza virus, one of the things it likes to do or can do very well is change and adapt. That becomes a problem.
Why experts are calling for greater surveillance of the virus. After the break, Rosie is here with that issue.
Hey, Christine, tonight we're going to talk about that cabinet shuffle for the Liberal government.
I may or may not have a conversation if he asks me views on some colleagues. Sometimes he has, sometimes he hasn't.
Could a shuffle rally the Liberals or anger more inside caucus? Chantal, Althea, and Andrew join me to talk about that and more.
Raw oysters are the prime suspect in an apparent outbreak of illness in BC. 64 cases resembling norovirus have been reported since November 1st around Vancouver, Surrey, and Vancouver Island. Symptoms include stomach pain, vomiting, and other intestinal distress. Some people have visited the ER, but there have been no hospital admissions. More than half of California's dairy herds have now been exposed to avian flu, a worrisome spread that has some people calling it COVID for cows. Cameron McIntosh checks in on the risks that avian flu poses to people in the U.S. and here in Canada.
In California, a run on eggs leaving shelves empty.
They say it's because of the bird flu.
That's what Angel Miranda's suppliers keep telling him.
It's been like this for like 2 weeks.
Bird flu, or H5N1, is a virus. That's it under a microscope. Spreading in the U.S., still rare in people, the U.S. Centers for Disease Control confirms about 60 American cases. The first severe one this week in Louisiana. California has declared a state of emergency, including chicken culls, as the virus spreads in poultry and dairy cattle, exposing those who handle them.
Right now, it's coming from generally commercial situations, farm workers with a lot of exposures who need to have PPE.
In Canada, there's only been one confirmed human case, a teen hospitalized last month in BC with a strain closely matching local wild birds. It has not been found in Canadian cattle or Canadian milk, which is pasteurized. Outbreaks in poultry are mostly contained to BC, where there have also been culls.
I would recommend that people not get too freaked out about the food supply at this time, but do take precautions because this virus can be found in both milk and in eggs.
Most concerning, say experts, multi-species spread. The World Organization for Animal Health estimates it's in 500 bird species and about 70 different mammals, raising fears it may adapt more readily to humans.
Influenza virus, one of the things it likes to do or can do very well is change and adapt. That becomes a problem.
Prompting this call last month from the World Health Organization.
What we really need globally, in the US and abroad,
is much stronger surveillance.
Canada is testing, but health authorities warn that eggs and poultry should be cooked and that anyone working on farms or handling dead or wild birds must take precautions. Cameron McIntosh, CBC News, Winnipeg.
Now let's break down an extraordinary week in Ottawa. Rosie's here with At Issue.
At issue, a sudden cabinet shuffle to respond to a political crisis and deal with ministers leaving and others pulling double duty.
I may or may not have a conversation if he asks me views on some colleagues. Sometimes he has, sometimes he hasn't.
Will a shuffle anger more Liberals, or could it rally support? I'm Rosemary Barton, here to break it down on what tomorrow may bring. Chantal Hébert, Andrew Coyne, and Althea Raj. Nice to see everyone again this week. We reported a couple of little bits of news that David McGuinty is going to take over as Public Safety Minister. Nate Erskine-Smith will take over as Housing Minister. But there are obviously other names and people at play here. And why do you think that they have to do this shuffle, Chantal? What, other than, I guess, filling some of those holes, what do you think this is about?
Those holes are pretty big. When you think that there are 3 ministers who are kind of carrying on double or triple duty. So that shuffle is not a choice, it's an obligation.
Right.
But when you do a shuffle to kind of give a party or a government momentum, you do not do it at midday on the 20th of December, a Friday. You do it in the new year when people are paying attention again. So I am not seeing the shuffle, one, as an effort to send a signal other than there is still a government in place. But two, I don't think it's the shuffle that the PMO and Justin Trudeau hoped for.
No,
I think they
definitely
to
not,
have a shuffle that would send a big message earlier in the week, not just with Mark Carney, maybe with Christy Clark, the former BC Premier, who seems to want in on the federal Liberal Party, maybe others. That's not happening tomorrow.
So, Andrew, is it out of necessity? Is it to buy the Prime Minister some time to think about where things are going? And what is the risk, like any cabinet shuffle, that it will anger some people and disappoint them?
Yeah, well, first of all, most cabinet shuffles are vastly overinflated and overstated in their significance. If there's been a theme to this government, certainly to the Chrystia Freeland exit, but also to some of the other top ministers now sitting on the sidelines, it's how little individual ministers really get to do very much versus the all-encompassing power of the PMO. That being said, I think the main thing here, as Chantal said, is there's holes to be filled. They're just for running the government purposes. I think a lot of it is also just to show that the Prime Minister is still in charge, to signal perhaps, maybe with not a full-throated lack of any ambiguity, but to signal that he may or may not be staying around. You've got to carry on business. You know, I think his game is going to be larger than that, but this is certainly a piece of it is if you don't have a cabinet shuffle and people start to say, well, maybe the wheels have completely fallen off and he's, you know, exited for some foreign state or something.
Yeah, and Althea, how much more difficult do you think this shuffle is than previous ones, given the week that we've all seen?
Well, Chantal is right. This is not the cabinet shuffle that they envisaged a week ago. This is not at all the plan that they had. And that plan seems to have actually shifted throughout the week. So Chrystia Freeland's bombshell announcement, which was not expected at all, has really forced a reshuffling of the deck. This seems to be more of a caretaker cabinet. And frankly, I wonder if we're going to see another cabinet because it still seems like some of the leadership contestants are going to be in this cabinet. So if then there is, one assumes, and it looks increasingly like the Prime Minister's resignation is not a matter of if, but when, and then how the whole thing plays out, we would see another cabinet shuffle. Because I can't see, if you're a leadership candidate, why you would want to be in a Justin Trudeau cabinet or even in an interim leader cabinet. You obviously want to go around the country selling, well, not selling because they're Liberals, but signing up registered Liberals. There are some interesting moves. I think that they absolutely had to have a shuffle. You can have the finance minister also be the border minister. Like, that's just not feasible. People were already complaining that they were doing double duty. I mean, Anita Anand is at Transport and Treasury Board. These are both quite demanding portfolios. So they had to make changes. People are very upset, though, justify the changes. And I'm sure we'll get more into that. But it was always going to be a challenge. It's an even greater challenge than I think they expected.
Talk to me about that, Chantal, why you think that might be here too.
No, but think of it. If the Prime Minister, as many expect in Ottawa, says at some point between now and January 6th that he wants the party to replace him as Liberal leader, it doesn't stop him from staying as Prime Minister. And by the way, we've not had in recent history an interim Prime Minister. They all stayed after they quit until the successor was appointed. But at that point, anyone that sits in cabinet today and wants to run would probably have to withdraw from that portfolio. By my count, if you go through the list of hopefuls, that's 4 senior ministers. I don't believe Justin Trudeau has been going around asking people, I'm about to shuffle the cabinet. Do you want to run for my succession?
No.
So, and that's Althea's point about how solid is that cabinet versus what happens if Justin Trudeau decides that he's moving on, or how solid is it if he decides that he's staying? And I don't think either question gets an answer tomorrow.
Andrew?
Just to pick up on something Althea kind of hinted at, which is that there may, or pointed to, which is there may be further cabinet shuffles after this. And of course, if you're playing the game of trying to keep the caucus guessing, then you never want this to be the final shuffle. You want them all still hoping that that if they stick around, even if they only get to be a cabinet minister for 6 weeks or 6 months, for some of them that'll be the best thing on their resume. So.
Go ahead, Althea. Yeah.
I was going to say, I think the challenge will be, if he continues to stay on, that more and more MPs will actually tell him no thank you. I mean, what we've seen in the last week are people who thought that they were going to get into cabinet, assume that they were not going to get into cabinet and be very angry about it. We heard people who were actually fervent loyalists of the Prime Minister start to say publicly that he needed to go. We are hearing people say not just that we need a new leader, but he needs to resign immediately. There's a gamut of opinion, but it is getting harder and harder to find people who are not dissenters, and that was not the case 2 weeks ago.
Okay, let's pause this here, and then when we come back, we'll talk about where Trudeau's head might be at and what he should be thinking about as he contemplates the next part, his future. At the end of a difficult week, what more do we know about Trudeau's plans? That's next. At issue tonight, Trudeau's future. Some MPs continue to call for the Prime Minister to step aside.
We're heading for oblivion, and we need to stand up as elected representatives, do the right thing.
Or just dodge the question entirely.
There's a lot of discussions about what is going to transpire or not. I cannot provide you clarity and answers about people's futures.
What does Justin Trudeau need to be thinking about after the shuffle? How should he be reflecting on his political future and his career? Chantal Hébert, Andrew Coyne, Althea Raj. I want to take more time to talk about this because the shuffle, all of this is all part of what has to happen and what he's thinking about and who he's talking to and what the right decision is. Althea, tell me what you're hearing about where that discussion is. I don't think he's made up his mind, but you tell me what you think.
I don't know. He hasn't told me if he has.
No, but the people, you talk to a lot of people. So just
he has been having one-on-one conversations with cabinet ministers where he has told them, some report a variety of different things. But what is clear is that he is actually seriously considering resigning, or saying so publicly, in a way that he wasn't in like Rebellion 1.0 in October. That he feels that he has the fire to continue the fight, but isn't sure that he has the team around him to do it.
Yeah.
And he's right. You know, we are not a presidential system. There is not an election for a prime minister. He has to lead the parade, and if there's nobody behind him, it's not much of a parade. The other thing is the caucus seems to be getting a little bit more emboldened. Like Chrystia Freeland's resignation has lit a match underneath them. And I think it's possible that if he has no movement, that they will try to force movement. The challenge is that they're not aligned on what they want that change to look like at the moment. But it does really seem like he is coming to terms with the fact that the end might be near. I was at the Liberals' Christmas party on Tuesday, and the chatter was not whether he was going to resign. It was like, what's the mechanism if he does, like when he does resign, not if, but when. Like, can we shorten the leadership rate? Does it really need to be 3-4 months? Can it be shorter? Could caucus select a leader? And if so, like, would the rules have to have a virtual convention to allow that to happen? Like, it's almost like the party is making a decision and he hasn't publicly announced it yet.
Yeah, I also have heard, and we've reported that he has asked for sort of information around what it would look like if he stayed. So I also think, I totally agree, Althea, that he is perhaps for the first time seriously considering leaving, but I also think he's seriously trying to figure out how he could stay. And so I wonder what that means. Andrew wants in, and then I'll go to Chantal.
Well, let's state, first of all, it's extremely hard to remove a sitting prime minister who doesn't want to go. It's only happened twice in our history. Paul Martin controlled every aspect of the Liberal Party, root and branch, and it still took him 3 years to push Jean Chrétien out. So it's extremely difficult. Now, obviously, the situation is extremely dire for him, but let's consider the possibility that he is, in the back of his mind or at the front of his mind, wants to stay. What would be the thing you would say to people is, oh, you know, I'm really reflecting on my future. I'm really thinking about this. I'll need a few weeks to think about it, but I'm still going to, you know, I'm looking at this really hard. You wouldn't just say I'm staying. You'd play for time. And I think that's at least a plausible theory here is he's playing for time. He's trying to keep the ball in the air, trying to keep people guessing until, lo and behold, you wake up one morning and you realize, oh, it's too late now. We're going to have to go with him through the election. So I'm not. And the final point I'll just make is that's the consideration for him and for the Liberals is the Liberals. A lot of Liberals would like to replace him as leader, but obviously they don't want to go into an election. What is needed for the country, in my opinion, is an election, not just a change of leadership in the governing party. The uncertainty that's besetting the country right now really ought to be top of mind for people.
Well, I do wonder, Chantal, whether the threat of Donald Trump is the thing that he could point to. If he was looking for something. I don't know.
Yes.
It could work the opposite way, of course, as well. But
I'm telling Canadians what we need is stability after this week. It's going to be really hard to make that argument, especially given that he needs to survive in the House of Commons. So what does he do? Suspend Parliament forever until the G7 in June and think something is going to happen? If you look at the trend, I mean, I like Althea, he hasn't told me, but this is a prime minister who started off by losing voters. Then he lost the NDP. Then he lost control of the House of Commons. Then he lost control of caucus. Now he's losing control of cabinet. It's like you're watching someone, the water keeps going up and he's standing on this little island of sand.
Yeah.
I'm hearing both things, that he's trying to find a way to stay, which in part, I want to believe is comes from people who think the worst of Justin Trudeau, and maybe they're right. I'm hearing the opposite, that he wants to know how to go about a succession contest that doesn't spread over months. And by the way, the Liberals did move from Stéphane Dion to Michael Ignatieff within a matter of days and weeks. But on that basis, it would take most of the people who want to run for the leadership to think, let someone else take the hit in the next election and then I'll run, and to let one person stand.
Yeah. It also, I'm hearing from people who are concerned that if he stays, the people who want the job are going to make it really, really ugly to try and push him out, that the leadership race would be pretty awful for the party. I don't know what you think about that notion, Althea.
I think the leadership race is going to be divisive, but it would be divisive whether you have it now or you have it 6 months from now or a year from now. I think the Middle East question is going to be a very divisive question. I think just ideologically where the party goes is going to split people apart. I think what's really interesting is that This is not going to be a cabinet shuffle full of loyalists. I mean, you had Arif Virani there, the justice minister, who couldn't offer his wholehearted support for the prime minister. Nurt Erskine-Smith, who's apparently going to housing, can't do that either. I mean, that means you're kind of scraping the bottom of the barrel if you can't find people who are willing to have your back. That says a lot. I do think that a bigger question is how much can you trust the NDP to keep their word? So they want, or Jagmeet Singh, the leader of the party, has said he wants the prime minister to resign. What I understand from his office is he means not just resign as Liberal leader, but actually no longer be the prime minister. But Mr. Singh has, called wolf before, and he lent his support on confidence measures throughout the fall, despite saying he was not going to do so, or suggesting he was not going to do so after the end of the supply and confidence agreement. So there is a scenario where the prime minister could announce that he is stepping aside, there is a Liberal leadership race, he intends to stay to become the interim leader because he needs to provide stability because of Donald Trump and la-di-da. And then he runs in the next election because he is the interim leader and the leader of the Liberal Party and still the prime minister. So there's a lot, I think, of games being plotted out within caucus and within the leadership teams to see what's more beneficial for us and what do we need to push for. But I think if he does not offer his resignation in the next weeks to come, it's going to get really, really, really ugly.
Andrew?
The thing that will really be the key is cabinet. I don't think the caucus is as much of a threat as people claim. We still only have 16 people who've gone on the record. 16 out of 153 have gone on the record saying he should step down, even at this late date. I think that, as I say, cabinet will be key. The shred of hope that he's got in that is when you've got a number of different people with different agendas, leadership agendas, playing them off against each other, playing off people's different estimations of what the best timing for them is, may give them a chance to kind of wiggle through.
About a minute to you, Chantal.
A number of the silent cabinet ministers are assuming that the only issue is when he announces that he leaves. I don't know what they do beyond that. As for interim leadership, we've never had an interim PM. So prime ministers resign, but they stay until, which is a recipe for stability, looking at the Trump inauguration. So that would be a totally stable and possible scenario. I don't buy that the government would fall because the prime minister can prorogue basically until March 15th. Then he needs to get credits voted, and it's a confidence vote. So the Liberals, I'm sure, can find a way to find a new leader between tomorrow and the end of February.
But just so I'm clear, Chantal, your point is that he could stay on as prime minister while a leadership race happens, or he couldn't even do that, you don't think?
No, of course he could stay on. The prime minister stays on, ensures stability, as does his palace guard, and a new leader is picked. And we've done these things over a matter of 2 months, not 4, 6, or 8.
Okay, I got to leave it there. Thank you all. Nice to see you a second time. I'm going to see a couple of you again tomorrow because it's that kind of week, but I appreciate it. And now I'll send things back to Christine in Toronto.
Up next, a baby capybara gains an online fan base.
And you'll see mom or auntie trying to push them out and they're refusing. They just want to eat their food and have a good time.
Tupi's time in the spotlight in our moment. That little rodent right there is Tupi, a baby capybara who's already gaining a lot of fans online after just being born earlier this month at the San Antonio Zoo in Texas. Not only has Tupi become an influencer, but this little animal has also inspired its own digital currency. Tonight, the captivating capybara makes our moment.
Tupi has developed a large internet following. It's a little tiny brown, kind of looks like a mix between a rabbit and a bunny. You can see them out in their exhibit all day long, constantly either hanging out with mom and aunt, or you'll quite often see them inside their food bowl eating, and you'll see mom or auntie trying to push them out and they're refusing. They just want to eat their food and have a good time. We've had people coming to the zoo constantly asking, where is Tupi? Apparently somebody has made a cryptocurrency in their name, but the San Antonio Zoo has no affiliation with that. We love these animals. We take care of these animals every day and we have a passion for it. And it's amazing to see people coming in and kind of sharing that love and passion with us with these new babies coming into our zoo and spreading the love and the knowledge.
All this attention, and the zoo staff doesn't even know Tupi's gender yet. They're letting Tupi get a bit older before they check that out. And I'm not sure I follow the whole crypto link, but the zoo did make it clear they have nothing to do with the currency, but they are happy to see people checking out their capybaras. Well, from all of us here at The National, thank you for being with us. You can watch anywhere, anytime on the free CBC News app and subscribe to The National's YouTube channel. I'm Christine Birak. Take care.